Azerbaijan 2024, Oscar announces himself. What a great drive. So we're going to be getting into that. And also, is Lando Norris really cut out for this championship thing? Ammar and Shez are going to cut that one up for you. Here we go.
Let's go. All right, so we had a cracking weekend in Baku. It was both qualifying and race. I thought Chez went really well. A very interesting race, a very satisfying race, oddly speaking. I know there was that last, well, couple laps remaining incident that we can obviously get into, but all in all, I think that this is the race where Oscar announced himself. It probably was very stressful for him, as he just mentioned in his post-race comments, but I can't think of a more satisfying win, right? Because Hungary, he did win, but there was a whole lot of drama there. It kind of, it was kind of one of those where you won, but you felt like you kind of lost, and it was all kind of gloomy. But this was an out and out masterclass, really. So let's get into it with Oscar at first, right? So Shez, what did you make of Oscar's race?
Yeah, I mean, it's good. Like Oscar's now got what, two race wins this season? Lando's one. Oh, did I see
Oh, we'll
that?
get into Lando too. Just let's keep the line.
So I don't think that you can separate those two, but like if but let's just talk about Oscar. Like Oscar's qualifying was on point, 4/10 off Charles Leclerc in the end, but I think Leclerc put him possibly one of the laps of the season in qualifying on Saturday. Um, and then I think that drive had a bit of everything, right? So the first stint from Oscar maybe took a little bit too much out of his tires. Knew that he had to do something about that in the second stint. Got a bit lucky with Perez getting held up behind Norris around the pit stops. We can talk about that in a minute as well. And then, when Charles Leclerc came out in front of him, just disregarded his race engineer, Tom Stallard, and went for the move even when he was told not to, and then made it stick for the remainder of the race to the point that Charles Leclerc, master tyre whisperer of 2024, managed to burn out his rear tyres and almost get taken for the podium. If if Sainz and Perez hadn't taken each other out, there was a potential that they could have both ended up on the podium and knocked Charles down to fourth. And I think that would have been a travesty, but it could have happened. But all throughout all of that, Oscar was kind of making it happen. I mean, to have Charles Leclerc in a Ferrari in DRS range for 30 odd laps and not let him past you is pretty impressive. And to do that in your second season of Formula One, I think, we keep saying it, but Oscar's ceiling has not been reached. And if he's at this level now, yeah, I mean, I think it's he of all of the drivers in that bracket that don't have a championship right now is the one with the least flaws about him, I think.
Well, I would just ask you to pump the brakes on that. Like I'm all down for praising Oscar, but there's one thing to be the underdog, the new kid on the block, and then when expectations come in, those things typically get tested a little bit more. But your point is well taken. What Oscar did put on yesterday was nothing but a masterclass, and I think I had back and forth on social media about Ferrari, and at first I thought that it was really marginal in terms of their errors or their miscalculations mainly. But I think what they'll kind of like go back and look at this race and kind of kick themselves a little bit because when the first pit stops came, Charles had built, I think, about a 6 second lead, maybe thereabouts. And I think they totally overestimated what that lead would have been because, Oscar had undercut him. He was putting in a pretty hot lap after that on his out lap. Leclerc put in a very soft in lap and then also a very soft out lap. Maybe they were hoping that they could bring the tires up to temperature. And I think that miscalculation did him in with that move, by the way, the overtake move that you just mentioned. I think that's one of those things where, again, when you don't have pressure of expectations and you don't have pressure to meet certain things, Oscar could fully send it in. And I thought it was very revealing in the post race, in the, what is it, the driver's meltdown room or whatever it's called. Meltdown room, cool down room. Oh, maybe a meltdown too on a different occasion, but in the cool down room, I thought that was very interesting, their exchange, because Charles didn't think that Oscar was going to send it in. Oscar said, oh, I basically did send it in with the hope of being 50-50 on that. And that was kind of amazing. I also think Ferrari misjudged the fact that they didn't have a whole lot of what carried over from qualifying, right? The 4 tenths weren't 4 tenths. It was probably a tenth that they had on the McLaren. And I think they misjudged what that looked like. Because in hindsight, they probably could have gone a little bit longer, if anything, or maybe could have done something better on the in lap out lap really for the pit stops. But it's very
Yeah,
marginal in the end, though.
but I don't buy this. Oscar's just doing this because he's got nothing to lose thing, particularly. Like he's been operating at this level pretty much since 2 races before the summer break. He's been getting more out of that car overall as a package than Lando Norris has, which is why this whole conversation about team orders has come up in the first place. And in terms of that move, that was the move he needed at the time that he needed it. In the same way that Daniel Ricciardo made a career
Right.
in the early part of his career with dive bombing everybody, Max Verstappen still does it. These aren't like spur of the moment, I'm just going to do it because I've got nothing else to lose. It's make or break moves that if I don't do it, I'm not going to win the race.
Well, but I mean, if it is 50-50, Chess, what happens if he puts it in the wall? What are we saying then,
Yeah,
right?
but
So,
yeah,
I mean,
50 is kind of the way that
well, it's not
is
my words. Those were his words,
yeah,
not my.
50-50 is the way that he's going to play it out in public. But in reality, that there's a lot more nuance within that, right? You don't make that move without having the knowledge of how to control things so that actually things work out in your favor. And that's what he did. Like he's going to sit there and
Yeah.
go, "Oh, I was worried I was going to put it in the wall." But in reality, the fact that he didn't put it in the wall suggests that he knows how to not put it in the wall. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense. And I think again the stars aligned for him in that
Well, the stars aligned a little bit because Charles let them align for him a little bit,
let
didn't
them align, and then the Checo Paris thing, as you mentioned too. Well, I think the other thing is that there was some miscalculation on Leclerc's part, right? And kudos to him. We're going to talk about that, right? We're kudos to him for putting his hand up and saying, "Look, my fault. He made an error. He misjudged what Oscar was doing, and in fact, if he had done what Oscar was doing to him for the last 30 laps, maybe the roles would have been reversed." But I think that's a little bit on him. It's also a little bit on Ferrari, like I said before. They could have done a little bit better with how they kind of went about this. But to be honest, it was really marginal, and it was not egregious. Is probably the better way to say it. But it gave us brilliant racing for 30 odd laps because you did think at some point Leclerc was going to overtake Oscar, but that never really happened. And I think you just got to give Oscar's flowers on this occasion.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it was like Charles drove an incredible race. Like he was just on it all weekend, bar the little indiscretion in FP1, which I think probably didn't make a massive difference to what ended up happening
When
in the
they said
race.
they couldn't do any long running, though, which did,
Yeah,
because Ferrari on the hard tires did struggle a little bit more
but
than McLaren
nobody
did.
used the hard
That's
tires other than
true.
Mercedes, other than Merck. No one else used the hard
That's
tires
true.
in
Yeah.
in free practice. So like, I'm not sure I buy that argument. But he was great in the first stint, brought his tires in brilliantly, kept him going, let Oscar burn up his, had that big gap to allow him to, even though Oscar was trying to undercut him, still have a big margin of error for the pit stop, came out ahead. And then it was only the sort of 3 or 4 laps before and after the pit stops that kind of swung this race around in Oscar's favor, right? Where he was probably a little bit too easy on the in lap, which he really should have attacked. And then on the out lap, he did what I think he thought he needed to do, Monza style,
Yeah.
where like I'll bring the
Bring it up
tires
to
in.
speed. Yeah.
I've got Alex Albon behind me to defend against Piastri and Perez, so it's fine. I can do this. And then Piastri just sent one in on him, and that I think was I don't mind the tire prep. It was that where Leclerc did a kind of uh, the thing that you should never do in Formula One, which is think that you're going to get another opportunity, right? Um, I know we always say live to fight another day, but when you're the defending car, he just needed to cover the inside line a bit better than he did. He held up his hands afterwards and said, "This is what I did, and I didn't do it well enough," and that's what allowed Oscar through. But Oscar, for like the next 30 laps, just defended that inside line every single
Exactly. And
time.
that's all you needed
Charles
to
had
do,
a run
really.
on.
So,
Exactly.
yeah.
Every time Charles had a run on him, he had to go to the outside. Now, I don't think this was all just Oscar being amazing. He was, but he did have some help, didn't he? The first is that he probably wouldn't have been in that position if Perez had managed to undercut him. And that didn't happen because he had a great number two driver, Lando Norris, backing up Sergio Perez for him.
We're going to arrive there.
Definitely going to talk about that.
Stop.
And then there was the rear wing. I don't think anyone can have failed to see the post race video of what Oscar Piastri's rear wing looked like when it was at low speed, where it was angle of attack like this, and then as it was heading down the 2.2 miles straight, and it was suddenly like this. Harry Benjamin was talking about, oh no, it was Karun, wasn't it? He was saying that he has to have like only 4 or 5 tenths. Well, the reason he needed 4 or 5 tenths was because Piastri was pulling away from him when DRS wasn't open. I think that's tricky, and I don't think Ferrari expected that was what was going to happen. Although maybe they should have, given the potential protests that are going on. So because of that, I think Charles ended up allowing a pass to happen that he should never have allowed to happen. So tiny little error in judgment, if not in racing, cost him that race. But I do want to say, and I promise this will be the last thing I'm going to say about this, is that it was really refreshing to see a battle where you had lap after lap after lap, a driver within DRS range of the other guy. You just didn't know what was going to happen. Is this the lap where Charles going to get him? Is this the lap where Oscar's going to make a mistake? Is this the lap where Charles going to chuck it in the wall? Are they going to go side to side? Are they going to go 2 or 3 corners and then have a decision? And then we get a decision about what happens next. No wheel banging, no not leaving the other person any room, no putting anyone in the wall, none of this kind of having to go to the steward's room. That, everyone, is
there were 2 other drivers who did that for you, but I don't
say.
I think
that's what I wanted to
that's
see.
fair. But but there are also some track characteristics. Like that is virtually the only spot where you could have overtaken another car. So there's something to be said about that as well. And I do think, look, I think
that should make you even more desperate, shouldn't it?
It should. And look, I mean, again, Leclerc did the math on this, and again, I don't think that he and Ferrari thought that Oscar would be able to hang on for 30-odd laps. Like that was a long time in this race, and a long time. And I mean, so this race to me, yeah, you're right. It's those 3 or 4 laps, but it's the sum of tiny things, right? The not so aggressive in and out laps, right? The slight misjudgment of, well, I'm going to let him take turn 1 as an Oscar, let him take him turn 1, and then I'll get him back in the next DRS straight. That was a misjudgment too. I think the flexi rear wing also does it. And there's a part of me that believes that perhaps maybe Oscar would have overtaken Charles anyway at some point in the race. Had he been defending, maybe he wouldn't have been able to hang on for 30. So because, again, and we won't know that. But yes, it would have been different.
Things would have been stacked against him though if that had happened though, right? Because he would have had older tires and
he would have been in dirty air too, right?
Yeah. And I think if he hadn't made the move when he made the move,
i.e., it had to be done.
Tom Stallard's telling him you just need to back off and see your tires, you get another chance, and he just said, "Screw you."
Can you imagine if McLaren did? I mean, this is amazing. I mean, this is like this is stuff that Ferrari drivers used to do a couple of years ago. They pretty much ignore what the team said. But I think you're right, and I will agree with you. That's why this race was satisfying, right? When it came to the race win, there was no controversy, right? You couldn't say, "Oh, his fault, blah blah blah." None of that. It was good, clean racing. I think both drivers were valiant, and either way, even if the results would have turned out the other way, I don't think that we would have thought less of the other driver, even if the roles were reversed. So this was really a good race, really.
Exactly, just lap after lap, really clean, really fair, lovely, brilliant to watch racing, with 2 evenly matched cars and 2 evenly matched drivers, in essence, going up against each other. It's just that one of them is in their sophomore season in Formula 1.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, can we pivot slightly to the guy that
to his teammate
was supposed to get team orders
Yes, let's
this
go.
race.
You've been
What did
sitting
you
on
think
this. Let's
of
go.
what did you think of Lando's weekend?
So when I came on board yesterday and gave rapid reaction, I thought that that's still the storyline of the race, right? I mean, Oscar drove a brilliant race. All flowers, all kudos to him. But I think that in terms of the championship, I know not a lot of people will think, and this is not going to be a popular opinion, but in my opinion, Lando did what he had to do on Sunday to make sure that he well, damage limitation to some extent, but also he did gain some ground. Now, I know he needs to average an 8 point gain, and he only got 3 points, so that's still a net loss in some ways. But given how Saturday went, and I know we haven't kind of gone back and forth on whether it was his fault or not. Look, there was a flash of a yellow light. We can debate whether he should have, but
We should.
in reality, it is what it is. It happened then. Maybe the team should have been. We can go on but whatever it was, just well, he qualified P17. I think he started P15, right? But to come from there all the way in the race and come ahead and finish ahead of Max Verstappen, I think sometimes there's something to be said about just having a psychological victory. And I know it's not popular. I know you're going to tell me that, yes, there's a lot of blame to be placed on Saturday. And in fact, yes, there is, because you could argue that both McLarens could have finished 1-2 in this race, and that would have been real drama, though, right, Ches? Because if Oscar was driving the race that he was, and Lando is in P2, what do you do now, right? And can you imagine what we'd be talking about today? We'd be like,
Yeah,
oh my
sure.
God, but look, yeah.
But at least then Lando would have been forcing the issue.
Sure.
My problem with Saturday, so just for the avoidance of any doubt, what we're talking about is the final Q1 lap. Lando sees a flash of yellow on a board way down the straight, goes, that's a yellow flag, I'm going to lift off because I don't want to get a penalty, goes through turn 16, makes a mistake, and then ends up pulling into the pits and not even completing that lap. So if that had happened in isolation, right, I would have been like, okay, but this is now a pattern of behavior. I said in a video like 3 videos ago, go back and watch it, please. Sometimes we say some stuff that's insightful. I think Lando's too nice for this. He's too polite. Like, to see that yellow flag, what should have happened is he should have driven right the way up to it, that it wouldn't have been there anymore. And he would have just driven straight through it and finished his lap and got through to Q2. That was the priority there. You want to make some ground up on Max Verstappen? Get yourself into Q2. Look what your teammate did. Your teammate had the race that you didn't have because you decided to be too polite in Q1. And Ammar, but there's a bit more to this, right? Because this isn't just this race. This is exactly what happened in Austria, like just being a little bit too polite in wheel-to-wheel racing. It's exactly what happened when he, had that hours-long exchange with the pit wall in Hungary. And every time his team tell him to do something, again, Silverstone with the tires, why is he having to make a decision about tires when his team should be doing it? There's not enough fire in him, right? And you have to look at what Lando did in Q1 with that yellow flag, the politeness, and contrast that with Oscar Piastri, who in his calm manner said to Tom Sallard, no, I'm just going to make the move and I'm going to make it stick and I'm going to win the race. Right. There's a diametrically opposed attitude to going racing with these two drivers, right? And one of them resulted in a classic drive that we're going to remember as his breakout drive. Hand on heart, can you give me a race in which Lando's really announced himself and gone, oh yeah, this is the guy?
There isn't one. And I think your criticism in that regard is very fair. What I will just say on this occasion is that him not getting out of Q1 is on McLaren. And look, if that yellow flag had come a little bit earlier, even Oscar was in danger of not making it there. So what they should have never done is leave themselves that far out, be that risky. And if you're a championship contending team, these are the little details that you have to get right. Q1 shouldn't be hard for you to get out of. Like it doesn't take much. Like you have one of the quickest car, if not the quickest car. So you should definitely be in top 4. It doesn't make any sense that they did. Maybe Q2, I could kind of sort of see that. But again, McLaren should not be making that mistake. And look, While I agree with you, I think we're talking about two different personalities of drivers, right? So Oscar has his way of going about things, and Lando has his way of going about things. And look, there can be success and failure in both of these things, right? Again, if Oscar puts it in the wall on that occasion, what are we sitting here saying? Completely different. And I agree with you. He did. He didn't because he was confident in the car and he was confident in his skills. But again, this is just the what ifs are just right on the margins, right? And I think that in this case, you as the team, as in McLaren, should not be putting Lando in that position at all. Because and Shez, all of that said, what do you make of his race on Sunday? Because that was a valiant effort to come from all the way back down in P15 to avoid any trouble at the start
shouldn't
and
have been in
finish
that
the finish
position in the
race.
first.
He shouldn't have
been in
been.
that
But,
position.
but that's Saturday, right? So Sunday.
Can I put this question? Can I ask you a different question? Right. Let's say Oscar goes out in Q1 and Lando is P2 on the grid with Charles in front. Who wins?
I don't know.
Does Lando win that race for you?
I mean, I don't know that he races Leclerc the same way. I haven't seen enough. We'd be guessing, right? It's hypothetical, right?
Yeah, but you could. But you.
I think I know your answer. I would make it a toss up. I have no earthly idea because I do think, like I just told you a few minutes ago, I think that the McLaren was quicker than Ferrari on Sunday. It was quicker on the hard tires, and I think the very fact that Leclerc drove his wheels off that car tells you everything you need to know. They just didn't have enough to get Oscar because as great as Oscar's defense was, if the Ferrari had been quicker, right, not a tenth quicker, which is probably what it is, if it actually had carried over some of its qualifying delta, right, which the 4/10, if it was 3/10 quicker, Leclerc could have won.
Let me put it to you this way. Will Joseph comes on the radio to Lando as he's lining up a move on Charles Leclerc and says, "Mate, just back off."
Shez, but you say that now.
What would Lando have done?
Oh yeah, but we're praising Oscar for defying his team orders in that moment when we don't listen to the whole radio call.
Yeah, sure. But that's
and it's fine. On this day it worked. On another day it may not work, right?
Okay, but what I'm talking about this day, would Lando have defied team orders or the instruction from his race engineer and gone for that move?
Probably not, but he still could have won. It wasn't the end of the story. There were 30 laps. Were 30 laps. What if he was genuinely quicker than Charles?
There were 30 laps where Charles Leclerc was able to stay within.
Well, you just saw what Charles did, though. But you just saw what he did. He moved over, no, when he shouldn't have. You just got done telling me that.
Let me finish, right? Lando wouldn't have made that move in the first place because he'd been told not. He would have been told not to. That's my contention. And if he hadn't, then Charles would have got his tires working. He would have had a tire advantage of 2 or 3 laps, and he would have done what he did in the first stint and just driven away. They had enough pace in hand.
Well, maybe they wouldn't have told him that too. Did you consider that? Maybe they wouldn't have told him to not make the move then. And again, this is what I'm saying. Well, I mean, we're going into hypotheticals where I have no earthly idea what that would look like. We don't know if the pit stops would have happened the same way. What if Lando had been better on tires, as he has shown to be better with his tire management and not drive them off as is?
Then I think the car would have. I think the car would then regress to the mean of its pace, which is that it would have been a bit slower than the Ferrari.
Okay, but you don't know. I mean, we just got done saying Oscar drove his wheels off, right, in his first stint. Maybe Lando would have been better. So my point is, we can always do the ifs and maybes and hypotheticals. What I will agree with you is, yes, Lando has not announced himself. I think that is the fairest criticism that you can give. He's not won a race in that fashion where like, yes, he's your, and to be honest with you, if he's going to want to win this championship or even finish second for that matter, he's going to have to rattle off some amazing wins because just coming second, third, fourth is not good enough anymore. And I think he himself would tell you that. He's self-aware enough to tell you that he needs to be winning races in a much more convincing fashion. So,
mate, I'm gonna say it. I think Lando makes a perfect number 2. He's quick. He'll get the car into a decent enough grid position. And he's polite enough that he'll just pull aside for his teammate and let his teammate win the championship. Excellent.
Fair enough, but this year McLaren should be avoiding all kinds of mistakes. And again, by the way, we just sort of walked past the idea of Oscar's engineer telling him not to do exactly what he did. which again is another example of McLaren almost shooting their driver in the foot, right? Because that's what we would have said had he not been able to do it. And again, 30
Lucky they
laps is
had a
a
driver
long
that
time, though. Yeah, but
lucky they had a driver that knows what to do.
hey, some days it works out, other days it won't work out. So I think we'll come on here and say, well, you should have listened. But
which day is it not?
well, we'll
worked
see.
out?
It's only been 18 months, and McLaren has only really been in the championship fight for about 6 months, if that. Like, when was Miami? Like in May? It's 5 months. So I think there's an element, and we've talked about this before, and you're right in saying that when you arrive, you need to be ready. But I think what we are seeing, fair enough, but when you've not been in it, there is no substitution for repetition, right, Shez? So until you actually go through it, you may not be ready. That's just.
But then but then the opportunity might have passed. Just look at Jordan.
Yeah, fair enough. But even Red Bull were knocking on the door for such a long time, and 2021 happened, right? So I mean, they're different.
But Red Bull had
no two things are
to win a championship, though, didn't they?
Yeah, but Shez, there's just no way to duplicate that. Like, I know we keep coming on here week after week and saying McLaren should be better. And I think they would agree, but there is no magic bullet or magic wand or something that they can whisk and say, okay, now we're going to be perfect. You go through this as a team, you suffer through it for a few times, and then you get better. There's just no other way to do that. Like, I mean, to your point, what is it that they should actually do to avoid all the mistakes? There is nothing to do. Like, they just race situational.
Well, they should have had a clear idea of whether they were going to back one driver or
But why don't they have that clear idea? Why don't they have that? They've not been exposed. But they've not been exposed to these situations, and that's the issue there. That's really the issue. Now, look, we can have the same debate about Charles. Had they had a better string of races than they did in, what was it, Canada, Spain, and what else? There was another race there. Had Leclerc done enough to finish in the top 10, this could have been a completely different thing. We'd have been talking about Leclerc trying to catch Max. I mean, we have to do some math there, but he would have been exactly where Lando is right now. So my point is.
Yeah, so both of those teams have messed things up, but my argument is that McLaren have consistently had a car that could potentially win a championship. They are now 20
points. But they didn't expect that, no? They didn't expect that.
Yeah,
so no, but I know what I'm not.
That's my problem with this, though, isn't it? Is that you can't.
I'm not excusing it, Shez. I'm explaining it. I'm not excusing it, but we're seeing it. We're seeing what's happening now. If they didn't expect, none of us expected. I mean, we started the season off saying how many races is going to be until Max wraps up his championship. We said right about Singapore is when it'll all be done, right? No one's saying that right now. So clearly, we're all arriving at the scene much quicker, and they're not ready. They're just not ready.
Now we are talking about 3 or 4 different cars being potentially able to win a race, none of them being the Red Bull, and yet we shouldn't be. We should be talking about Lando dominance from.
Yes, it was 4 races ago that we really started doubting whether Max can actually win. No one in their right mind said that Max wouldn't win the championship, but we all knew that Red Bull would be in trouble. And you have to give credit to McLaren. They have finally gone ahead of Red Bull in the standing. So from their standpoint, this is not the year that they were expecting to do any of this, and they're going to come away with the Constructors' Champion. And you have come on here and said time after time again, if Lando wants to win a championship, then he has to do more. So the argument can be made that maybe McLaren is at peak.
I agree. I agree. Lando has not done enough to make the argument clear for them to put their full backing behind him. And race weekends like this weekend are exactly why I think McLaren are much happier when Oscar is out front, because the line of communication is much, much clearer. I want to win. I will do what needs to happen to win. Whereas Lando is full of indecision and it is too eager to please people to win a championship. Bottom line, this weekend is a microcosm of that. He even did the thing that was needed to let Oscar win the race. Like, perfect number 2. That's all I'm going to say. Excellent number 2, but I don't think he's.
I'll put a pin in this, and we'll come back to it at season's end, because I do agree with you. I think that if he's got to win the championship, or at least get close to Max at the end of the year, he's got to find a way to win races. I I'm not as harsh as you are in this judgment of trying to please everyone. I don't think drivers necessarily do that. I just
No, they
think there are
shouldn't.
different personalities, and yes, maybe there's an evolution that needs to happen. Look, he has been with McLaren when they stunk for almost. He's been with them for 5 years, and barring the last 6 months, they've really been nowhere for a long time. So there's a little bit of that, and I think that this is not an excuse. It's just an explanation of what you're seeing. A team is arriving at the scene not being prepared because they have no muscle memory, and this is just going to take time. Now, yes, Red Bull are also imploding. Like nobody thought that Adrian Newey was going to leave Red Bull at the beginning of the year. Had he been there, as you have contended, maybe Red Bull drive away in the distance, and this doesn't even matter. So all of these things can change very quickly.
Yeah. Well, anyway, those are those are our thoughts. Does he need does he need to just shed that nice, polite demeanor and just do what needs to be done in the car, or is Oscar just gonna romp away from him from now on in? Let us know what you think. I think on that note, we should probably call it. Please like, please subscribe, please leave us a comment. We'll read all of them. We respond to as many as we possibly can. And we will see you guys in the next one.
Later.